Hello. Today is a bit of a kind of state of play. I've been talking about a number of different principles, theories, ideas that I've had about a golf swing in the last few weeks and months, and I thought it'd be a good idea to actually kind of try and compress them down into a basic idea of the golf swing again. My intention with all of these videos is to try and make a golf swing easier to understand, simpler for you in the long run. And sometimes I don't achieve that at all because I'm introducing new theories, new ideas, which might contradict the things that you've been doing in the past. So in order to maybe put it all together in some kind of a bit of a kind of a jigsaw puzzle that you can understand, I thought I would make this video. So really, when it all comes down to it, it's all about controlling impact, and it's all about controlling the path and the face through impact. In order to understand that, you can't be moving the club consciously down a ball to target line. It's just not happening because you are swinging a golf club around yourself. You are not standing directly over the golf ball, and therefore this club has got to be moving in a circular movement around a central axis in a tilted plane. That's simply what's happening. What is, however, happening in a good golf swing is that between your feet, you should be moving the club on a more or less path through the ball towards the target, and the club face should be square. In order to understand that part of the golf swing better, basically the base of your swing, you've got to understand that the movement of your golf club is produced by the pressure that you're applying to the grip of the golf club. And rather than you moving the grip laterally towards the target, what I believe you should be doing is more moving the grip by applying pressure down the shaft. And this should be happening from a point around about what we call P6, where if we were to have an extension of your hands, they'd be pointing at something like 7 o'clock, if this is kind of a big clock I was standing in, but your club will probably still be around about parallel to the ground at this point, with the club face pointing very slightly down towards the ground. At this point, what I believe you should be doing is pulling the grip apart. At this point, you should have the feeling that you are trying to stretch with your trail side down the shaft and pull with your lead side up the shaft. By doing this with your hands, although the grip can't be pulled apart, obviously, what you're saying to your body is lead shoulder, pull back and turn, trail shoulder, push forward and turn. Indirectly, your shoulders will then be talking to your hips and saying, in order to do this in the amplitude that this guy wants, hips, I need you to turn as well. And legs help us do that. So applying these kind of forces is the reason that you're going to get this active and accelerated rotation in the body in order to help the club to swing around you, and for that short period of time, swing on a path through the golf ball with the club face square. Applying this pressure to the grip is stabilizing as well the club face. You're going to start with your grip with the lead hand pointing slightly up to the sky in what we call extension. And by doing this, you are going to make sure that it's not doing that anymore. Straightening your arms and hands out and pulling the club out will basically straighten the lead wrist and put it back to a more neutral position, if not into a little bit of flexion. And that, combined with the rotational forces and the inertia in the golf club, I think will almost always help you to get back into flexion. In fact, if you were to just make a swing back to around about this 7 o'clock position and then straighten your hands, you will actually see the club will actually go down towards the ground and slightly back behind you. So it will not only cause the wrist angle to change, it will change the actual path that the club is going to come on, flattening it out and moving it slightly back from the path that the golf club will have taken away from the ball. This extension rather in the wrist is basically going to always cause the feeling of the club head kind of going away almost outside of the ball to target line, although that's not really the truth, but that's the feeling. And it's later in the swing that it actually flattens and comes down on a flatter path behind you. More about that in a second. So I think, quite honestly, one of the most important exercises you could be doing is simply hitting golf balls from around about this feeling of 7 o'clock position and holding this extension through impact, holding it as long as you possibly can, because the longer that you hold it, the more that you are telling your body you have to turn the shoulders. And the longer you tell your body you have to turn the shoulders, the further it's got to turn the hips. And the further it turns the hips, the more it's got to work with the legs. And again, in amateur golf, one of the main problems is you just don't do that. You don't work with your legs, you don't work with your hips, you're not turning your shoulders enough. And so there's no way you're going to get your hands in front of the golf ball if your shoulders are still parallel. If you can get your shoulders to open relative to their starting position, get the lead shoulder back, that's going to carry the lead hand forward, and it's going to help you to get lean on the golf ball or on the shaft and get this so-called lag. Again, more about that in a second. But really, these things are happening automatically as soon as you start applying these forces to the club, and they are causing the club to come through the golf ball on a pretty neutral path with a stable club face. That would then mean that everything above 7 o'clock, I'm just taking more run up. And I'm taking more run up by turning a bit more, by lifting the arms up a bit more, and by hinging my wrists. Now, as soon as you start to hinge your wrists, you've got to unhinge your wrists. And hinging your wrists, again, will usually mean that if you just hinge them up, the club is actually going to feel like it's going out there, and then slowly come behind you as your lower arms rotate. And trying to get them on a plane parallel to the original shaft plane is something that we're always looking for. But it's more of a problem, how do I release the wrists? And here it's very important to have the feeling of the club going behind you. Now, I know I've talked about going into flexion, bending, rotating, and doing all these strange things, but in my experience working with students, it's better not to think about what the wrists are doing and just really think about where you want to throw the golf club in the downswing. And this is going to be behind you. So if you can imagine a big mountain here, like a triangle, you're going to go up the left side of the mountain. I want you to throw it down the right side of the mountain. Doing that will basically bring you back down to 7 o'clock. Now, you're all going to say, well, but we don't want to release our wrists like that. But when you do this, this is not going to be the only thing that happens. On the contrary, when you do this, you will actually start to rotate back to your starting position with your hips anyway, simply because your leg will resist this force that you are applying here, and that will be enough to turn your hips back. Also, dropping your arms down will also apply inertia to the golf club, which means that although you think you've just done that, you actually haven't done that at all. On the contrary, your arms have come down to 7 o'clock and your club is still pretty much parallel. You still have hinge here. Just the hinge is not so much deviation in a radial or ulnar sense, it's just basically bending back of the lead hand. And this can be released by stretching the club out, by pulling the grip apart. And that's basically our 7 o'clock swing, so to speak. So when I'm pitching a golf ball, I'm basically taking it back to about chest height, hinging the wrists, and then releasing them there and going immediately into this stretch. Of course, the full swing then is just take it back a bit further and a bit higher. Complete your shoulder turn, lift the arms up until they collide with your chin, and see where you are at the top. So we're going to go on more or less the same path as by the pitch, hinging the wrists and up, and there we have the end of my golf swing. Obviously, if I were to straighten my leg a bit more, I could get a bit more. If I were to stand up, I could get a bit further, but here you've really got to think about your own physiology, and your body should be telling you when that's enough. Try not to bend your lead arm, try to keep that pretty straight, and at the top of the swing you're here. Now you're going to do exactly the same thing as you just did with the pitch. You're going to throw the club out behind you. This is going to send your lead wrist into a bit of flexion. It's also going to close the club face a bit, and it's going to, more than in the pitch, throw forces out in this direction that your lower body's going to have to resist, and will resist quite naturally. And by resisting it, it will start a hip rotation quite actively back towards target. Now, if you're a 20-year-old golf professional, you've been doing nothing else your whole life than playing golf, then you might even be able to accelerate this and get so much rotation in your hips that by the time you actually start turning your shoulders, you've already got 45 degrees of hip rotation to the target. But for the rest of us, forget it. You're going to break your back. You haven't got that much mobility. So probably you're going to be lucky if you're back at around about parallel where you started. But it's not a conscious movement. This is something which is happening as your body resists the forces that you are applying to the golf club back away from you and behind you. What's very, very important, because your club is going back away from the target, is that you allow your arms immediately to swing down. Don't keep them up there. They should go straight away with your club. So it does have the feeling as if you're going fishing here. The rotation, however, of your body and the dropping of your arms is again applying inertia to the club. The resistance of the weight of the club is stopping it from being released in this way. And therefore, although your feeling is you've done that, it looks more like that. And again, you're getting down to this 7 o'clock position with the club almost parallel to the ground, your hands pointing out at 7 o'clock, and then you're going into the stretch. And this is the most difficult thing to time in a golf swing. When do I go into the stretch? And it's going to need practice, to be perfectly honest. But in the end, you're basically taking a full backswing, releasing, and then stretching at the bottom, and that's a golf swing. Why is golf then so simple, if that's all there is to it, Jonathan? Well, because as soon as you start applying forces with your hand at the bottom of your golf swing, you've got to apply exactly the right force. If you imagine the short swing at 7 o'clock here through the golf ball, I'm applying pretty much the same force with my right side as I am with the left side of my body. The pressure down towards the ground is the same as the pressure I'm applying away from the ground. As soon as I start to take it back up and release, accelerate the golf club down towards the ground, then obviously the club has already got enough acceleration down towards the ground. The lead side has got to be working a lot harder in order to clear a path for the arms, hands and club through the ball. So when we get to pitching, we're turning harder. And what do you think's happening when you're swinging a driver? You are actually having to balance the forces that your trail side is applying down towards the ground with the forces that you are using to stop yourself hitting into the ground with your lead side. So to a certain extent, it's your lead side, your ability to rotate and clear with this lead shoulder to pull the club up with your lead hand, which will decide how much pressure you can apply to the club with your trail hand. Because there's already so much force being applied to the club in the downswing towards the ground, you've got to somehow equalize that in your downswing in order to keep a nice round movement through the golf ball. And then there's these things called biorhythms, which means you're different every day. Your biorhythm is sometimes saying you're feeling good and you're swinging quickly, and your brain will have to then change the amount of forces you're applying to the right and left side of your body. On other days, you're stiff, you don't feel very good, you're hardly turning your shoulders at all, and you can't apply too much pressure with the trail side because otherwise you're going to be chunking it in the ground every day. But basically, that's my take on a golf swing. The real golf swing is about moving a golf club around your body, not moving a golf club down the target line, or even a ball for that matter. It's about applying pressure to the golf club in such a way which makes your body want to turn, which makes your shoulders, your hips and your legs work, and hopefully strips you of this fear of not hitting the golf ball, because doing that will actually keep you in a far better axis than trying to hold everything stiff here and swing your arms backwards and forwards. Everything above that level is about taking a run up and creating speed. We are lifting the arms, turning the shoulders, hinging the wrists to get more speed in the downswing. That's the only reason we're doing it. We've got to be very, very careful though, because if we come down on the same path as we went up, we're hacking. So we have to make sure that the wrists release the golf club on this flatter path behind us, and then that we accelerate the club down that flatter path using the arms, and at the end through the ball using the entire body in an active acceleration through the ball. I hope you understood all that. I hope it is a simpler way of looking at the golf swing. If you liked it even a little bit, give me a like. It helps the channel immensely. If you haven't subscribed to us yet and you found that interesting, then please do subscribe, but I'll be coming back with more on the same theme very shortly. Until the next time, goodbye.